Hi, it's Kirsten again. In this part of our mini video series for the parents of preschool children who've recently started stammering, I'll be talking about tips and suggestions for ways you can support your child at home. In the interest of keeping each video quite short, I'm going to talk about a different area in each video. And today I'll be talking about conversation tips, suggestions for the ways you actually chat with your child. I wanted to start just by showing you the leaflet which is available on our website. We have several information leaflets. This one is specifically for parents of preschool children. You can download it or you can request a hard copy from us if you prefer. And we've put the link for where you can download it from the website in the description below the video. But in the leaflet there is a section about how to help, and I'm going to pick out a few of the suggestions from here today to tell you about. The 3 tips I want to talk about in this video are, I'm looking down because I'm glancing at my notes as usual, so these 3 tips are: focus on what your child is saying, use comments and leave gaps in conversation, and experiment with reducing your own rate of speech. I'm going to go into them in a little bit more detail, but first I wanted to explain why these suggestions can be useful. And they all kind of come under an umbrella, which is that of reducing pressure on speech. And pressure on speech isn't a negative in itself, but for some children who can stammer, putting a lot of pressure on their speech can actually make things more challenging for them. By pressure, what I mean is when we ask our children to say particular things at a particular time, so when we put them on the spot to deliver some information to us, to say something right now, say a particular thing right now. Examples of this can be with young children. Lots of us as parents do this. It can be such a joy hearing our children as they develop language, as their vocabulary grows, as they learn to name more and more things in the world around them, and then they begin to string these words together to form sentences and to explain completely new thoughts that they've had. It's such a pleasure. It's very easy for us as parents to try to pull more of this out of them. We want to hear the evidence of this language development. It's such fun. And there really isn't anything wrong with that. It's just that it's not always that helpful for children who stammer when we do that. We might do it by asking very young children to name the objects around them, because we want to see which ones they use, which ones they know the names for, and which ones they don't. For older children, we might do it when we want to find out stuff about their day. We might be, if they're in nursery or going to preschool, we might not know that much about how they're spending the day, and we're genuinely curious. So we ask them lots of questions to try to extract this information. But what this does when we use all these questions is we are asking for specific bits of information, and we want them right now in response to the question. And that can be quite a challenge for children who stammer, that demand for something spoken right now, and a particular something. So reducing this pressure on speech can be really helpful. It doesn't mean that we want our children to speak less, far from it. We want them to speak just as much as ever, but we want to give them a little more control over what and when. I'm going to say a little bit more. So the first one I suggested was focus on what your child says. If I was going to make that sentence a bit longer, I would say focus on what your child says and not on how they say it. Remembering to pay attention to what it is that your child is trying to tell you and respond to the message, not to the way it's said. Not getting hung up on the stammers and the getting stuck, but really valuing the things that your child is trying to tell you and share with you about their world. And whether the whole sentence comes out easy or whether they get stuck on every single word, and stammer through the whole thing, that you demonstrate to your child that what you're interested in is what it is that they want to say. That can be of real value for a child who stammers and is perhaps struggling a little more to get their message across. The second tip I mentioned was using comments and leaving gaps in conversations. This can be really useful to do as a conscious way to try to reduce the use of questions in conversation with your child. So rather than asking your very young child to name the things in their environment, you can do that and you can describe them. So you might say, oh look, there's a big red ball. With older children, when you're chatting and wanting to find out about their day, you can try by telling them about your day instead. This way you're showing them a way of explaining. You tell them about your day. You might even say, if you'd like to tell me about your day, I'd love to hear it. And you give that choice to the child about whether they want to name something, whether they want to describe something, whether they want to tell you about their day right now, what it is they want to say. You don't demand that from them at a time of your choosing. You open the door to that sort of conversation. You show them that you're interested and you're comfortable with leaving silences with which your child can fill if they wish or not. And many children will fill those silences. They want to tell you things, but it gives them the time to decide when to do it and what it is that they want to say. So we've talked about focusing on what your child says and using comments and leaving gaps which your child can fill or not in conversation. Another thing that you might find useful is experimenting with reducing your own rate of speech. And this can help because it demonstrates to your child that you have time, that speech isn't something they need to rush out under pressure, but that you are demonstrating with your own manner of talking that this is something that you can take time over, that there is space for everyone in the household to talk. I'm going to signpost you to another video to watch which actually discusses these tips and some others in much more detail and really far more eloquently than I can do. It's a really lovely video. It's called 7 Tips for Talking with a Child Who Stutters. It's about 16 minutes long and you can find it on YouTube. We'll put the link to that in the description below as well. It's well worth a look. It's got a group of speech therapists talking about these tips for talking with children who stammer. But they consider it in the context of if there are siblings in the house, how do you deal with that if you really are in a rush to get somewhere and your child is trying to tell you something and you genuinely don't have time, how to deal with those things. It's really, really well done, so I do suggest you take a look at that. 7 Tips for Talking with a Child Who Stutters. The last thing I'd like to say, thinking about both the tips that I've talked about today and those in the 7 Tips for Talking with a Child Who Stutters video, is don't try to do all these things at once. I don't think it's possible for kind of anyone to implement multiple things simultaneously and be able to do it right and pick out which ones help and which ones don't. All families are different. Some things will be useful for some families and not for others. What can be a much easier way to go about it is to think of perhaps one of these tips that I've talked about today, or look at our leaflet, or look at the 7 Tips video. But pick out one which you think, oh, okay, well that sounds like it might be interesting. Pick out one and try it out. Do a little experiment with it. And when I say try it out, I don't mean try it out once, or try it out for just a couple of minutes, or even try it out for a day. I mean try it out over a week and then sit back and have a think. Was that helpful? Did that help me? Did that help my child? Does that seem to be making the interaction between myself and my child easier? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then brilliant, you found something that helps. Keep doing it. Do more of it. And if not, then maybe you move that tip to one side for now. You can sort of park that and pick something out, pick something else and try that for a week. And really find the things which are going to work and be useful for you and your child and your family. I'm going to leave it there for today, but I will be back in the next video where we'll be talking about building your own resilience to stammering and the benefits of that. Bye for now.